welcome back to another video from Thailand. Today we are going to talk about abandonment wounds, specifically the ways they can manifest in attachment styles and in the way we perceive of ourselves and therefore limit ourselves in our day-to-day lives. Now, when we have a core abandonment wound, what that means is typically something might have happened in our childhood, or maybe something didn't actually happen that was that bad, but we perceived in our childhood a fundamental fear of being abandoned, being left, being worthless, and therefore not useful, and people don't care about us, and therefore we are going to be abandoned and need to do something to compensate it. That is kind of the core feeling at the base of the abandonment wound. I would assert that in most cases, many people have this manifested in one form or another, and although it can feel very real, very traumatizing, very painful, it really comes down to our beliefs about ourselves that we have built over time on top of these stories from our childhood. So as a little kid, maybe I was at the store and throwing a temper tantrum, and my mom said, okay, if you don't shape up, I'm gonna walk over here. And as a little kid, I ingrained the message that if I am having a meltdown, people will leave me, I will get left. Now, that is of course not the method my mom might have been intending to send. She was just, this is a real story by the way, she was just trying to stop her kid from having a temper tantrum and saying, all right, we need to move it along. We're going through the store, it's okay. But to little Andrew, it might have interpreted that as if I'm not perfect, if I'm not happy all the time, if I'm having an emotional meltdown, people are going to leave me, and I can't have that. I'm a little kid. I'll die out here. That can manifest as an abandonment wound, a core fear that people will abandon me because fundamentally, love is conditional. Love is something that I can change. If I act certain ways, or if I'm not perfect, whatever the case may be, your particular brand of abandonment wound might vary a little bit, but they all come down in some way or another to the feeling that fundamentally people will abandon me because I am not enough. And this manifests in so many different ways. People will just give up because we feel not good enough, we feel like a loser, I am fundamentally flawed, and we do everything we can to zone out. So we become very addicted to, drugs or alcohol or social media or anything that will drown out our experience of self, because our experience of that kind of background self-voice is very negative. We want to escape from it. Escapism or achievement. This was my particular brand of coping mechanism was, you know what? I'm gonna do everything right for the rest of my life. I'm gonna get all of the best grades. I'm gonna do everything right. I'm gonna never make a mistake again. Then they won't abandon me because I will be valuable. Another thing I did, and another way this might manifest in your life, is that you try to fix other people, or you try to approach people who are in emotionally vulnerable situations. You say, you know what, this person's, if I can make them better, if I can make them happy when they're sad, if I can be there for them when they are not whole, not complete, when they need somebody, if I can fulfill that need, if I can fix them, then they'll never leave me. Once again, a kind of very toxic, actually, pattern, but something that we will act out over and over. And if you've noticed yourself maybe dating the same person over and over, or having sort of the same career moves and pitfalls over and over, or you feel like you're just stuck in kind of this weird pattern, most of the world, I believe, lives their life kind of stuck in these patterns where we allow our internal narrative about ourselves to control things because we fundamentally have identified with it. So if I believe that I'm worthless, it's not Andrew thinks he's worthless and I'm kind of aware of that. It's just I'm worthless and that is my experience of life. Or I need to do these things to compensate. That is my experience of life. And when you're in that, you are stuck. But if you're watching this video, there's great news because you can wake up. It's time, perhaps, if you are watching this video, to wake up to the fact that these beliefs are just that. They are kind of a story that we learned as a little kid. When I was a little baby, you could throw up on people. You do whatever you want. As a little baby, nobody cares. Oh, it's cute. Nobody makes you feel worthless as a little baby. But at a certain point in life, we develop the awareness that people will treat us differently based on what we do. All of a sudden, it is not just okay to be, we need to be a certain way. And what we do as a little kid, that can be traumatizing. We internalize that, and then we make decisions that have ripples throughout the rest of our lives. So I mentioned at the beginning, attachment styles. And if you're not familiar, attachment styles are essentially the way in which we conceptualize ourself and our role in a relationship, be it platonic or romantic. So if you are an anxious attached person, this is the kind of stereotypical abandonment wound. You might find yourself compensating by being overly giving, very nice guy, nice girl, people pleaser. Your job is to make yourself needed by doing everything you can to make the other person as happy as possible, on the assumption that if you do that, if you make them as happy as they possibly can be, they won't leave you. They need you. Furthermore, people with anxious attached tendencies tend to be more needy. They tend to want the other person to text back fast. They tend to be the person who wants to spend as much time together, and that is because they have that fundamental fear of abandonment and that fundamental fear of unworthiness, and they want to, in order to try to prove to themselves constantly that they are needed, that they are valuable. They want to spend as much time together. They want to be in contact as much as possible with the other person because it reassures that fragile ego that, oh, they do want me, they do need me. But that is a bottomless pit, and that is where the anxious attachment can be too clingy, they can be too needy, and they can actually start to push people away, which in a twisted way then perpetuates the abandonment wound even further, because the needy person, the anxious attached person, will project all of their energy outward. How can I make you happy? Oh, I need to please, oh, just be, love me, love me, love me, essentially is what they say. And then that kind of has a tendency to scare the other person away. Therefore, once the other person is out of the picture, the anxious person has more proof. They say, you know what, I am unlovable, I am broken, I am worthless. And that cycle repeats. They try even harder next time, they do even more, and it doesn't work. And on the other hand, we have avoidantly attached people who are kind of standoffish, they keep a little distance, they might be a little bit more cold, and it might seem like they have different motivations, like they don't attach quite the same way, like they don't show affection. But in truth, avoidant attachment can also be based in an abandonment wound, because there's the fear that if somebody sees who I really am, if I let them in and truly let them see me, they will reject me and abandon me because I'm worthless. So my coping mechanism is to push people away. What the avoidants do is they'll keep everybody away because that fear is overwhelming. They say, I feel safer if you're not close to me. Both of these manifestations of attachment style can be driven by sort of that same fundamental fear, that fundamental feeling of worthlessness, and I'm going to be abandoned because I'm not enough. So what the anxious person does is they say, well, if I'm going to be abandoned, I'm afraid of that. I don't want that, so I'm going to do everything to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm going to be as nice as possible. I'm going to do everything right. And the avoidant says, if they see who I really am, they're going to abandon me, so I have to keep them away. I can never let them in. I can't trust people. I can't be open around people because they're going to reject me. They're going to see who I really am, and then they're going to abandon me. Both of these fears at their core can come down to that sort of same point. And this sort of fundamental feeling of worthlessness and fear of abandonment has a tremendous amount of ripple effects throughout our day-to-day lives, and it feeds into the way we perceive so many limitations in our environment, which is a big theme on my channel. It's kind of overcoming the limitations we perceive in our life, whether we see them environmentally or within ourselves, things that we think hold us back. That kind of psychological structure is very often rooted in these feelings of, I'm going to be abandoned because I'm fundamentally not enough. Or what's going to happen if somebody leaves me? What's going to happen if that doesn't work out? What this does is it makes us very, very attached to results. That fear, that deep-rooted fear, because it is very terrifying, because it cuts back to, in my case, being afraid I'm gonna get abandoned at the grocery store. Not that that's reality, but that is a terrifying moment in the sort of forming psyche of a little kid who's interpreting reality through a really unrealistic point of view, but that still gets kind of written into the base code of the way I perceive reality for the next 20-something years. So when we do that, we start to use those fundamental patterns, those loops we get stuck in. That's why so many people are asleep all the time. They're operating under the belief of, I am fundamentally flawed, something's broken within me, I'm a fuck up, I can't do it right. Therefore, I need to drink, or I need to prove them all wrong, or I need to do... It changes everything you do. It fundamentally shapes the way you interact with every single situation in your life because it's the underlying belief structure. When you are freed from that, and we'll talk about how to do that, but when you are freed from that, you can begin to find that so many of these perceived limitations can just dissolve because the basis for your sort of view of life, that this fundamental limitation exists, that I'm bad, or I'm not good enough, or I feel a certain way, or I'm afraid of these things. When that is dissolved, you are free to do so many other things. So many new situations open up, so many new opportunities that didn't fit your former paradigm. So what do you actually do, right? When you find for yourself that, I think I have one of these abandonment wounds, I behave that way in relationships, I find myself stuck in these patterns. Well, like I said, for one thing, it's good you're watching this video because the only way for us to really wake up out of these behavioral patterns is to have something snap us out of it. In my case, heartbreak at the end of a relationship. Some people become alcoholics. They are hit rock bottom. They call it hitting rock bottom for a reason. You hit a hard wall, and so many people are just kind of getting by in life. They're not fulfilled, but they haven't hit that wall yet, and they're just kind of silently mediocre, miserable the whole time. I would encourage you to dive within yourself and explore and ask, is it true, these fundamental limitations I believe? Is it true that I'm worthless? When I talk about attachment styles are perhaps manifestations of this belief. But attachment styles, people talk about how to cope with your attachment style or how to, behave to fix your attachment style. And I believe that attachment styles are just a manifestation of a deeper belief. If you cure yourself, if you examine the belief that you are flawed and broken and need to compensate in the first place, when that dissolves, your attachment styles will kind of dissolve as well. There might be patterns, just kind of familiar things you do in relationships, but your core drive to keep people away because they're going to reject me, or your core drive to make sure everybody loves me because I need it and I'm not good enough. Those things fall away once you realize you are operating on an old pattern. Once you realize that it's not true, it's not fundamentally true that you are broken or unlovable or unworthy or not good enough. All of these things are just ideas that we have in our head that are built on experiences we had as little kids where we felt like a separation. Oh, I'm not good enough. Mom and dad don't love me the way they used to. I can't do that. Oh, I really wanted that thing and it didn't work out and it must be because I did something wrong. That person yelled at me. Why? When you're a little kid, when you're under 5 years old, these things are fundamentally shaping your view of reality. They get ingrained into who you believe you are, and they change the way you interact with the world. So, start to dive into the foundation of your belief of unlovability, of unworthiness, of the reason you feel like you'll be abandoned. Why is that? And is it fundamentally true? Because I would assert that it is not. And when you start to see for yourself that it is based in, not in reality, and it's based in falsehood, then you can free yourself from these patterns that so many of us are stuck in. You can begin to live your life in a new, better way. If you want to know more information about how we form these patterns specifically, check out this video right here on the inner child and how it forms. And if you want to know kind of how to transcend some of these patterns, check out this video right here on how to journal your way to inner child healing. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.